Big campaign, big launch today from the Prime Minister, a big speech saying get Brexit done to unleash Britain's potential. As the Prime Minister, according to the press release, is going to set out his dynamic vision for the country, vowing that in his first keynote speech of the campaign, that only a majority Conservative government will end the groundhoggery of Brexit. Is this the main calling card for the government in this election? That actually it's just this is the only party that has a chance of winning power, which will get Brexit over and done with? Because a lot of people in recent polling have suggested that they don't think, even with a majority Tory government, that Brexit is going to be over and done with in a matter of weeks, months, or even years.
Well, the only way, you're absolutely right, Julia, in which we can make sure that we get Parliament working again is with a working Conservative majority. And if Boris is Prime Minister and we have that majority, then we can get Brexit done. As Boris has pointed out, we've concluded a deal with the European Union. The 27 other EU nations think it's a good deal as well. We can get that done by January if Boris is re-elected, and we can then get on with investing in the people's priorities in the NHS, dealing with crime and making sure that we level up schools and educational opportunity across the country. And also today, the Prime Minister is going to outline an exciting programme of environmental renewal and reform. We'll be talking about making sure that we can deal with the challenge of climate change by making sure that we plant trees and transition to electric vehicles. And we'll also be talking about the opportunities that we have to be a leader in the green industrial revolution.
Well, you mentioned the environment. There's been quite a lot of criticism, though, of the government's response to the flooding we've seen across northern England, particularly in Yorkshire, East Midlands, areas around Doncaster as well. Only yesterday, the Boris Johnson chaired that emergency COBRA meeting and to announce extra support from the army as well as funding for councils. About a week too late, though.
Well, the Prime Minister was in Matlock in Derbyshire on Friday in order to make sure that...
Was that when he did the mopping?
Yes, he did. He did.
That would like a lot of use to everybody.
Well, the Prime Minister was, as ever, hands-on at one of the affected communities. But as well as the Prime Minister being there, we've also seen the Environment Secretary visiting Yorkshire and
but hold on a minute. Helping people who've been flooded isn't about some politician turning up. It's about having emergency services on the ground. It's about the funding to help them to... why didn't he declare this as a national emergency to make sure that the funding was available, the resources were directed where they were needed sooner?
Well, the funding has been made available. On Friday as well, the Community Secretary, Robert Jenrick, triggered a scheme which meant that local authorities could apply directly for additional funding to help the individuals and the businesses and communities most affected. It's also the case that we have, as well as that, made sure that every affected business has access to £2,500 of support, and every affected household has access to £500 of support. And local authorities, of course, can spend more money with central government backing them up. And it's also the case that the Environment Agency have been working with other partners on the ground. Troops have been deployed, and indeed a Chinook was scrambled from RAF Odium in order to help with the flood effort.
OK, so the things are on the case there. Can we also talk about, in terms of the speech that Boris Johnson's making today, there's quite a lot of criticism of say, the Liberal Democrats back at the European elections for the naughty B word about to Brexit, a word Indeed. I can't say on air. They've decided to drop that now. A lot of concern about sort of the debasing of our political dialogue in that way. The Prime Minister today is going to accuse the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn of political onanism. Now, for those of not wondering what that word means, words I can use at this time of the morning, it means basically, should we say, self-love, I think is the politest way I could put it. Is that really the sort of language we expect from a Prime Minister?
Well, I think it is the case that Jeremy Corbyn is manifestly in love with himself.
That's not exactly what that word means.
Well, I think it's the case that Jeremy Corbyn, if he had the best interests of both the country and the Labour Party at heart, would be standing down. We'd have someone as Labour leader who could actually lead this country effectively. More than that, the Prime Minister's actually hitting the nail on the head, because if we have Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister, then we'll have not one referendum, but two next year, one again on the European Union and one on Scotland's place in the UK. Instead of wasting time in this self-indulgent way, it's far better to get Brexit done and then to concentrate on all of the policy priorities that the country has. So unless we have a Conservative majority government, we won't have action on the environment, let alone the investment the NHS needs, let alone the action to deal with knife crime crime, and the other problems that we face.
Well, it's reported today, a poll for the Times by YouGov has found that Tories are leading by 14 points after Nigel Farage decided to stand down candidates in 317 seats that were won by the Conservatives at the 2017 general election. Still a lot more pressure on him to stand down other candidates, but also demands on the Conservatives to stand down some candidates in seats which really aren't winnable for the Conservatives, to give the Brexit Party free run there to ensure as many Leave voting MPs are elected to the House of Commons on December the 13th. Is there any prospect whatsoever that the Conservatives are going to reciprocate the Brexit Party's deal and effectively stand down a few candidates?
Nope.
Not a single one?
Nope.
Why not?
Because we believe that everyone in the country has the right to be able to vote for a Conservative candidate. And in the past, people have said, oh, well, the Conservatives won't win here. They used to say in parts of Yorkshire, Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, that you could put a red rosette on anyone and they would be elected. But actually, at the last general election, we saw fantastic candidates like Jack Burton in Stoke-on-Trent South and Ben Bradley in Mansfield win seats that have been Labour for generations. The truth is that there are many people in the past who have voted Labour in good faith who cannot bring themselves to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. And we had 4 Labour MPs, ex-Labour MPs, I should say, last week, Ian Austin, John Woodcock, Michael McCann and Tom Harris, all saying that it would be wrong to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. He'd be a threat to national security, that people should vote for Boris Johnson.
And how do you feel about the news that your former colleague in the Cabinet, David Gauke, obviously a keen Remainer, leader of the so-called Gaukewood squad, has decided to stand as an independent candidate against the Conservatives?
Well, I think it's a pity. David's an immensely talented person. He's been a good friend, actually, and I've enjoyed working with him. David's right about a lot, but on this issue, I fear that he's got it wrong, because the only way in which we can make sure that we have a prosperous future is by getting Brexit done, getting that good Brexit deal, which will enable us to have free trade and friendly cooperation with the EU, but also deeper trade relationships with other countries. That means lower prices for consumers. It also means that our businesses can grow and that people can have good, well-paying jobs and job security.
But what do you make of the fact someone who was in the Cabinet only a few months ago said in a tweet last night, there are many excellent Conservative candidates who I wish well, but a Conservative majority at the next election would be a bad outcome for the country?
Well, even the best of us get things wrong sometimes, and David is wrong in this one regard, because it's only with a Conservative majority that you can actually break the deadlock. It's only with a working Conservative majority you can get Parliament working again. The choice at this election, as a number of people have pointed out, is pretty straightforward. There are only 2 candidates who can be Prime Minister, either Jeremy Corbyn or Boris Johnson. With Jeremy Corbyn, as well as the national security threat, you have the paralysis we discussed earlier of 2 referendums. With Boris Johnson, you make sure that we get that Brexit deal, that oven-ready Brexit deal, done quickly, which enables us to concentrate on the other steps that we need to take to invest in public services and to improve our economy.
One of his concerns is that you won't have an extension past December 2020 and that no deal is still on the table. That was certainly a concern for Nigel Farage before he agreed to stand down candidates in Tory-held seats. No deal is still on the table, isn't it?
Well, we believe that we can get a very good deal. We've already got one to make sure that we leave the European Union in good order, and we can move very quickly to get a free trade relationship with the European Union by 2020.
Just finally, you were a leading light in the Brexit campaign back in 2016. This has, divided the nation, divided parties. You left a lot of your good colleagues have left over the last few months. Has Brexit been worth it?
Absolutely. One of the things that we've seen is that the European Union, since that referendum, has been pursuing a path of ever deeper integration, which isn't right for the British people. By leaving the European Union, we can take back control of our laws, our money and our borders. We can be a self-confident country, and politicians will be more accountable than ever before to the British people. Overwhelmingly, people who voted Leave want to make sure that referendum mandate is delivered, but also there are many good people who voted Remain who now want to ensure that that democratic vote is respected, that we can move on, and the only way in which we can ensure that the deadlock in Parliament is broken is by having Boris as Prime Minister.
So you're looking at creating a £500 million ring-fenced fund for local authorities in England to spend on youth services, adopting a public health approach to youth violence.
Yes.
What exactly will this money be used for then?
This will be used to provide youth services to encourage young people to get involved in other activities and to keep them away from crime. It's a health-based, education-based approach, the sort of thing we've seen in Scotland, which worked with the Violence Reduction Unit, which has more than halved violent crime in Scotland. And we do have a knife epidemic on our streets at the moment that we have to deal with. The Labour and Conservative parties for too long have just abandoned people to crime and then punished them. And what we want to do is to try and discourage young people from getting involved in crime by providing an alternative, by providing youth services for them so that they have a brighter future. They're encouraged to find other ways of getting out and expressing themselves, and that we get away from youth crime.
I mean, look, everyone would want to get away from it, but you talked about what's happened in Scotland, particularly Glasgow's had a lot of success, but that wasn't just about being all understanding and, having ping pong tables at the end of the road. There was a lot of stick that went along with the carrot. There was zero tolerance of people carrying knives, and people were prosecuted and they were jailed. But I'm not right in thinking the Liberal Democrats, certainly at your last party conference, you were debating, you're opposed to mandatory jail sentences for carrying knives. Is that the case?
What we are saying is that there is a better way of dealing with knife crime.
But you are opposed to mandatory jail sentences?
Short sentences don't actually help anything. They make it worse. You take young people who've been carrying a knife and you criminalise them. You put them in jail for less than a year and you make the situation worse. You don't actually help them. You don't get them out of the situation.
Well, you get a youth carrying a knife off the streets. You make it a lot better for the people around them, don't you?
And what do you want? Do you want that?
I would like the young people carrying knives not to be carrying knives. And if the only way of making them not carry knives is for them to be behind bars, I'm all in favour of that.
The way you do that is the way they did it in Glasgow, and you have more community policing. And you encourage young people to get involved in other things. You invest in education, you invest in health, you invest in making a better society, and then young people have less reason. You break up gangs. In Glasgow, they broke up the gangs.
No, but Christine, what they also did, there was a lot of there was a lot of providing alternatives, a lot of talking to youngsters, and a lot of helping them. Absolutely, and I completely understand that. But there was also an awful lot of tough love, tough punishments for those who did break the law.
Julia, I was brought up in Glasgow. I know all about what happened in Glasgow, and I know that there was a lot of investment in policing. But the key to it was the investment in youth services, the investment in education, the investment in health. There's been a 50% cut in violent crime in Glasgow and 62% reduction in the people going to hospital, accident and emergency, with knife wounds. There was also an amnesty on knives. You don't just use the stick, because the stick happens after the event. You have to give people an alternative. And that's what this £500 million is about. It's about giving people an alternative, getting them away from crime, breaking up the gangs, encouraging them to see the community police as part of the community, to have an alternative, to work with them. That's what we want to do.
Look, I think there'll be a lot of people listening who completely agree with a lot of that and offering alternatives. And again, it's very easy to say, well, my kid doesn't carry a knife, but they're not living in the same circumstances. A lot of children are carrying knives for defensive purposes rather than wanting to be the hard lad on the street. They're just terrified themselves. But there are also a lot of people who also feel that those who do carry knives should be facing mandatory jail, because that's the sort of deterrent that might actually make them stop carrying knives and make our streets safer.
It's not a deterrent. It shows that it just gets young people, it criminalises them, it gets them involved throughout their lives in crime, and it doesn't work. Okay. And the way to do it is the way we're talking about, by treating it as a holistic problem and helping people, giving them an alternative, solving the problem before it becomes a crime, helping society, improving society, giving people an alternative, giving them youth services which provide activities for them. That way you get them away from criminals.
OK. Let's also talk, if we can, about some sort of the wider politics rather than just this specific policy announcement. We've seen, effectively, this unofficial Leave alliance, which appears, according to certainly a poll carried out for the Times and Sky, to have given the Tories a 14-point lead over the Labour Party, uniting so the Brexit Party voters with Tory Party voters, with the decision of the Brexit Party to stand down in those Tory seats. More pressure on Nigel Farage to stand down in other seats as well, and the Tories as well. We are not seeing quite the same level of Remain alliance on your side. You've done a deal with the Liberal Democrats, with the Green Party, with Plaid, but of course this only affects 60 seats and perhaps won't reap quite so many benefits as the Brexit Party deal has done with the Tory Party. Would you be looking at, have you been in conversation with at all at the Liberal Democrats, with some conversation with Remainers within the Labour Party to do whether an official or an unofficial deal?
No, because we are not interested in putting the Labour Party into power, putting Jeremy Corbyn in number 10. We have the Remain alliance, and that is what we're dealing with.
There's not a possibility at all.
Well,
if you had to make a choice between Jeremy Corbyn being in number 10 or having Brexit, that's sort of your choice now. Which do you personally choose?
That's not a choice. Andrew Gwynn, who's the Labour Party General Election Coordinator, is talking about preparing for Brexit and, doing another deal and all the rest of it. The Labour Party is not a committed Remain party. We will not be doing a deal with them to remain, because our commitment is to remaining in the European Union, and we have done a deal. We have come to an agreement with other Remain parties.
We've just been speaking to Michael Gove, a Conservative Cabinet Minister. I asked him if there was going to be any, effectively a quid pro quo, was the Conservative Party willing to stand down their candidates in any seats where the Brexit Party had a better chance of winning on December the 12th, and he gave a very firm nope. Is there any prospect at all now that the Brexit Party is going to get anything in return for the rather generous offer of Nigel Farage on Monday to stand down those 317 candidates?
Well, I think you are correct to point out it was a very generous offer from Nigel, and we have seen a corresponding surge in the Tory polls now that the threat has been removed of those seats falling to anybody as part of the Remain alliance. Now, of course, Mr. Gove, who of course is a bastion of truth, he has spoken the truth across all of the years. Every word he utters is gospel, yes? Of course he's going to say there won't be an official alliance, but we all know how this works, in the back room. So I'm expecting there to be a degree of, how shall we say, arm's length campaigning in certain seats, and that may correspond on the other side. This is all going on. The paperwork doesn't have to be in until 4 o'clock tomorrow. At that point, we will see if people are standing or not. I'm in no mood to stand down here in Ashfield. This is considered a marginal seat where everyone is gunning for it. No one's going to be standing down, I don't think, around here. But the point is, this will go, I think, all the way to the wire, and we are certainly showing that we are leading the way in terms of an alliance to make sure we don't head towards a disastrous second referendum under Labour, or the anti-democratic, illiberal move of Liberal Democrats to totally revoke Brexit.
I must point out, listeners, obviously we haven't got the full list of candidates yet. Won't have them until Thursday, 4 p.m. For that seat. So obviously other candidates will be available from other political parties. But there's a lot of pressure on Nigel Farage in recent weeks, and we know it came from people like Aaron Banks, a lot of battles within the party, even some of your own MEP colleagues like Lance Foreman saying, look, they were perfectly happy, happy enough, shall we say, with Boris Johnson's Brexit deal, the trade agreement that he'd done with the EU 27. And there was also quite a lot of concern within the party that actually the polling was showing that support was ebbing away to the Conservative Party from many people who'd said they would vote for the Brexit Party. You say we've seen that jump in the polls. Certainly this first poll. We'll wait to see if that carries on for the Tory Party, and a fall in the Brexit Party. Realistically, how many seats do you think the Brexit Party, without naming any specifics, how many Brexit Party seats do you think you could actually have? How many MPs could you actually have on December the 13th?
Well, there are 2 points to address there. First of all, Boris's deal has moved on. Now, the whole point that Nigel made about the specific announcement that we will not be extending the transition period, which we know Michel Barnier is brilliant at doing, that's off the table. There are now moves towards keeping a WTO Brexit on the table down the line. So since the deal was announced, there has been wiggle room, hence our reposition, if you like. In as far as how we go forward, how many we get in, who knows? I'm not Mystic Meg. So nobody knows. This is the most volatile general election probably ever. We are seeing political allegiances thrown away people are voting on Brexit terms. The Labour Party would like to it's like, don't mention the war, don't mention Brexit. They would like it to be about anything but the mood on doorsteps across all of the heartlands of the North and the Midlands is this is a Brexit election. And we think we are a credible alternative for people who do not trust the Tories. Lots of places would never vote Tory if you paid them. And we are a credible third way to ensure that if we get MPs in, we can apply pressure to maintain our position as the guard dogs of Brexit. If people don't trust Boris and they vote for us, we're going to be there making sure he keeps to his word, and that's our job.
If the Tory majority is elected on December the 12th, and if then there is a vote in the House of Parliament, maybe even before Christmas, or early January to get that, to get Brexit over the line, January the 31st, we leave. Yeah, we've got that transition period, December 2020. Is the Brexit Party going to stay in? Is it going to continue in its existence past January the 31st, or is it going to wait until after a trade deal is done, predicted by the Conservatives, in December 2020? And at that point, does the Brexit Party disband, or does it continue?
Well, again, this is Mystic Meg territory. I mean, if we leave the European Union on the 31st, then every MEP who is British will be gone. They should have been gone on Halloween. Well, we had jobs we didn't want. Now, all of those who are MEPs wanted to be made redundant. At that point, let's see. But until we are probably out, then we have a firm standpoint that we must ensure we get the Brexit the public want. And at the moment, that's not happening. So we need to be here to keep on fighting, and I'm absolutely privileged to be doing so.
Just finally, a man who I know you know well, I've had a number of meetings with, Steve Bray, the Stop Brexit man. Everyone who's ever listened to the radio or watched television live from College Green, the man who bizarrely is funded to live in a multi-million-pound house just around the corner, I think, from Jacob Rees-Mogg's house. And he stands in the street day in, day out, rain, sunshine or wind, whatever, shouting through his loud sailor, "Stop Brexit!" He's going to be standing as a Liberal Democrat candidate. I wondered if you had a message for him.
Yes, I always say hello to Steve. I always shake his hand. In fact, he won't have his picture taken with me anymore because we get on too well. And that's the point. He wants everybody to be falling out. I absolutely disagree with everything Steve Bray stands for, but I respect his right, even to shout expletives at me. Hey, it's a free country. Best of luck to him. I'm sure he'll be annihilated.
What do you make of this latest poll from YouGov? 14 points lead now after the Nigel Farage decision to stand down from Brexit Party candidates from the 317 seats that were won in 2017. Is that going to be enough, do you think, by election day to deliver the Tory majority that is needed to do what the Tories say they want to do, which is deliver Brexit?
The opinion poll now is just a snapshot, Julia, as to where we currently are. But 29 days to go and anything can happen. I remember the last general election and how our fortunes changed halfway through that campaign with the launch of our own awful manifesto, let's be fair. And so, therefore, I take nothing for granted. I also accept that regionally it could be different. We might be building up majorities in certain seats. 20,000 majorities are useless, quite frankly, when you'd rather to ensure that you were winning over other seats. I mean, the big debate today in the newspapers is all about whether Nigel Farage will stand his candidates down in some key marginal seats where the Tories are just behind the Labour Party or the Lib Dems. And I see that John Longworth, a Labour activist, a Labour Leave activist, is encouraging Nigel Farage to do just that, and Aaron Banks as well is doing the same.
But there's a lot. There's a lot of pressure on him to do that. But there's also a lot of pressure, a lot of growing demands that the Tories reciprocate by standing down to some of the seats they haven't got a chance of winning in some of the northern seats where people would never vote Tory but would perhaps cast their vote for the Brexit Party. So is there going to be any reciprocation at all?
Absolutely, but I doubt it very much, Julia. And the reason why is because the Conservative Party are a national party, and we intend to be around in the next 10, 20, 100 years, as we have been in the past. Whereas the Brexit Party are all about delivering one thing. The Brexit Party are about delivering Brexit. And I would assume that once Brexit is delivered, then, of course, all the MEPs will come away from Brussels, and the party's raison d'etre finishes. And so what I would say is that in certain key seats, and we've all seen seats where it's happened in the past, where the Tory has come a very strong second, and the Brexit vote is actually 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, not an awful lot. But if you add that together with the Tory vote, then, of course, they become the Member of Parliament. So the choice in those seats is either you end up with a Remain Labour MP, and I've got to say, I got sent an email, I don't know whether it was by mistake or not, by Gina Miller, who asked me to go on the remainunited.org site, which is something that she's promoting, whereby you can put your own postcode in, and if you want to see a Remain MP in your particular seat, it tells you which party to go for. Quite remarkable how many of the recommendations are Labour candidates, Julia. And I think that must come as a huge embarrassment to Jeremy Corbyn that Gina Miller, the absolute goddess of Remain, is recommending people vote Labour in lots of seats throughout the country in order to assure Remain happens.
What he did, there's some talk about having a Leave Alliance sort of website, which and send out to give people information about their tactical voting. Would you welcome that?
I think the electorate are really savvy, Julia, absolutely. And I think give people the information and the power for them to work out. If Brexit's the most important thing to them, then by all means give them a tool by which they can work out whether it's the Tory that's got the best chance or whether it's another party candidate that is standing. Absolutely. I've got no issue with that. But the electorate are savvy themselves. They can sit down and look at how the election results were 2 years ago and in 2015, and they'll get a sense, I'm sure, as to what the chances are. And I do like John Longworth's idea. He's written in one of the national papers today, and he's basically saying to Nigel Farage, why don't you just focus on 20 to 30 seats where you've got the strongest chance, particularly Labour Leave seats, where you've got the strongest chance of winning there, focus all your attention there, and it could make an absolute difference if Nigel Farage follows John Longworth's advice.
OK, well, let's talk about someone who perhaps doesn't think that Brexit should be what people should be voting on. David Gauke, one of your former Tory colleagues, has announced last night that he's going to be standing, of course, a leading cabinet minister for many years, that he's going to be standing as an independent. He said, posted a tweet last night saying, there are many excellent Conservative candidates who I wish well, but a Conservative majority at the next election would be a bad outcome for the country. What do you say to that?
Yeah, well, he's no longer a Conservative, and it's a great disappointment that David's taken this position. As you say, a few months ago, he was a government minister, and now, look, he's basically changed his mind. He now thinks that a second referendum is a good idea, but, of course, he's pleading to the Lib Dems, in essence, not to stand a candidate against him. So we'll see where that goes, but quite frankly, it does suggest to me that when he was in the cabinet, maybe he wasn't such a strong player in delivering the Brexit that the people voted for in 2016. I mean, he's not alone. There's Dominic Grieve and a few others who have taken similar lines. But the fact is now that, and we saw the launch of Boris Johnson's amazing election broadcast. Listen, I've been a member of Parliament. This is my 28th year, Julia. I've been following elections since I was 17 years of age, and I'm a bit older than that now. And I've never seen an election broadcast from the Tory party anything like that.
I don't think anyone has. Are we entirely convinced that Boris Johnson makes his own tea?
Well, I think
does he have no one to go and get him tea? Isn't he not got important jobs to do? He shouldn't have been busy sorting out, funding, some funding for the people hit by floods across the north of the country. Shouldn't he be trying to sort out the problems in the NHS rather than wandering around a corridor making his own tea?
Well, he was making a broadcast. I suspect he was making his own broadcast, which is more important than the tea he had. But I love your tweet this morning saying all those strategically placed posters around where Boris was walking so that we all know there's 20,000 more police officers coming. But also the big debate seemed to be all the tweets following the broadcast was, why did he not take the tea bag out and he put milk in first and all that sort of stuff? I mean, it's fascinating. The priorities that people have.
Oh, forget Brexit. These are the things that divide the nation. Can I just ask you about one more thing? By the way, I don't know to David Gauke, by the way. We're just mentioning David Gauke's going to be on the show in the next hour. We'll be talking to him here live on Talk Radio. Just want to ask you about John Bercow. It's emerged today that he has signed a book deal. What a surprise. He was, of course, your former boss, the Speaker, when you were Deputy Speaker in the House of Commons. That book is going to be out imminently. It's called Unspeakable. Should speakers be writing books about their time in the chair?
Well, I suspect he was taking assiduous notes throughout his entire 10 years, Julie. It comes as no surprise. Let's be fair. One of the most outspoken speakers. Most people haven't the faintest idea what any speaker's beliefs happen to be. But we know with John Bercow, he held very strong views. And indeed, there's a lot of people who say that had Lindsay Hoyle, for instance, been the Speaker of the House of Commons, then we would have left the European Union by now, because he wouldn't have allowed the opposition to become a parliament by breaking up tearing up the rule book of the House of Commons. So we'll see where that goes, Julie. It comes as no surprise. We already know that John's been signed up by one of the big speaking agents in order that he can go around and share his views with, no doubt, companies who are keen to have their employees listen to what John's got to say. So I'm not going to waste any time on that book, to be honest, Julia.
So yes, there's an announcement of £26 billion to be spent by the next Labour government over 4 years. Is that going to be enough cash?
Well, it's certainly more than the Tory party are offering. And we think that when you've got 4.5 million people on waiting lists and around 660,000 people waiting beyond 18 weeks for treatment, you've got, 34,000 people waited last year beyond 2 months for cancer care, and, young people in desperate need of help with their mental health are just not getting any support at all. We believe we need to bring forward this financial rescue plan for our NHS, put more money into our NHS after a decade now of cutbacks in health services, to put more money in to get the waiting lists under control and deliver the quality of care people deserve.
Well, this is £26 billion over the 4 years of the Parliament. That's above the £20 billion pledged by the Tories. Every year that works out as an extra £1.5 billion. Is that the difference between saving the NHS and the NHS saving? So it's failing. Is that £1.5 billion? Is that really the big difference?
No, it's £6 billion extra than what the Tories are proposing. And
Over 4 years.
And if you do it, so at the end of the projection, the government's plans would be 20 billion. Ours would be 26 billion. So it's 6 billion extra
a year.
Yeah. And in cash terms, because Boris Johnson will come on your show and talk about it in cash terms, it actually equates to 40 billion extra. So this is a big boost. And I think that's why a lot of the health think tanks today have said, for example, that yes, this isn't, I'll be honest with you, this is not as much as Tony Blair put into the NHS and Gordon Brown, but it's the second biggest boost in history for the NHS after Tony Blair and Gordon Brown.
What do you say to people who say, look, this is just a black hole of spending. Yeah, everyone wants to have a better NHS and cut waiting lists, more staff and all that, but you can keep pouring money in and it's never going to be perfect. We're never going to have the health service that we really want, and we just simply can't afford to keep pouring money in. What would you say to those people?
We've got to put money into it. I mean, look, I was just reading the other day, down at Southampton, people with glaucoma were waiting so long for treatment that they went blind, and there was a pregnant mother. Get this right, there was a mother who was pregnant with glaucoma waiting for treatment. She went blind. She's never seen the face of her daughter because she was waiting so long for treatment. How can we allow this to happen in our country? I mean, just at Pontefract, the maternity unit at Pontefract has had to shut its doors because there isn't enough staff. This was on the same day that the Tory spin doctors were going around saying, we're going to win all these northern rugby league towns. Pontefract, which is just down the road from Castleford and Wakefield, the maternity unit was shutting. We've got to put the money into the NHS to get the nurses, get the doctors, get the midwives, because patients are just being failed at the moment.
And a lot of the failure is due to the fact that we've got such a massive staff shortage in the NHS, isn't it? It's not just at consultant level or at nurse level. It's across the board. There is a huge shortage of staff, 100,000 plus staff who are missing. You're planning to recruit a lot of new staff. How are you going to do that? Is this providing extra training? Is this about paying more? What's the way to get those people back into the NHS? And why isn't it what the government is trying to do now currently working? Why is there such a shortage?
It's because, what happened is George Osborne got rid of something called the training bursary, which was essentially a grant for people to train to become a nurse or a midwife or some of the allied health professionals. He got rid of that grant, and the applications for nursing, particularly in mental health nursing and learning disability nursing, plummeted. So we would bring back that training bursary. So your listeners, if you've got any listeners, who think thinking about a second career, wanting to become a nurse or a midwife, we'll bring back a grant so they can train to be a nurse or a midwife. We think that would produce around 28,000 nurses, midwives, and health visitors and school nurses, community nurses, and so on. But we also want to expand the training places for GPs, for family doctors, because we all know how difficult it is to get a GP. I mean, I tell you something. When my kids are ill and I'm trying to ring up a GP, and the numbers of you've got on your phone constantly ringing and ringing and ringing, and you can't get through for ages, can you? We need more GPs so families have got more appointments.
Well, again, and a lot of people listening are going to welcome that. The trouble is, of course, this all takes an awful lot of time. It takes years to train nurses. It takes many more years, I'm daughter of a GP, to train GPs. This isn't going to happen overnight. How is the Labour government, and have you, if you're Health Secretary, come December the 13th, how are you going to improve things in the immediate aftermath of the election, in the first year? Because, those extra nurses and GPs and midwives aren't going to be on the hospital corridors or in the GP surgeries for years to come.
Well, you're right. I mean, this is going to take a little bit of time. And if I came on your show and said, don't worry, December the 13th, it's all going to be sorted, under control, you would rightly give me a kicking, and your listeners wouldn't believe me. So I'm being honest with your listeners. I'm going to put the money in. I'm going to recruit more doctors and nurses. It's going to take us some time because we've had 10 years now of cutbacks in the NHS, 10 years of cutting over 15,000 beds, for example. It's going to take a little bit of time, but we've got to get this investment in place to recruit those extra doctors, recruit those extra nurses, because, as I say, patients are not getting the levels of care they deserve at the moment.
OK, and let's also talk about how you're going to pay for that extra £6 billion a year.
Well, John McDonnell is going to make different decisions on taxation. We've not yet announced those taxation plans. We will in this campaign. Don't worry, they are coming. We're going to be clear with people.
Yeah, do you know when we are going to get the Labour Party manifesto?
Well, it will come in the coming days. We're still working on it, but it is coming. It is coming. It's coming in the coming days, and in that manifesto, you'll see every different item with an explanation of how we're going to fund it. And look, I mean, some people might disagree with us on this, but I think you've got to be straight with people. I think wealthier people in society, I think big corporations should pay some extra tax. Not everyone disagrees with that. The Tory party thinks corporations and wealthier should pay less tax, but I would rather put up the tax for the big corporations and the wealthier in society to do that than cutting health services. This is about choices, but that's what we're going to put to the British people.
The question is whether or not you can continue to tax those same corporations, those same people, and they stay in the country and to be able to pay that tax, when actually a lot of the extra costs of what you want to do in the round in your manifesto, it may impose extra costs on the NHS that would absolutely use up all of that extra £6 billion a year. Your party wants to move towards a 4-day working week. Look, that's not going to start, on January the 1st if Labour got elected. It would take years to bring in. But a 4-day working week for the same pay, it will effectively mean the NHS, because virtually entirely the costs of our staff, would have to hire a fifth more staff, and their cost of paying those staff will go up by a fifth. That's going to eat into that £6 billion is gone overnight, isn't it?
Oh, honestly, this is what Matt Hancock, he's the Health Secretary, if your listeners don't know who he is. He put this out last night in a press release. I mean, that was hopeless from Matt Hancock, I've got to say. I laughed out loud when I saw that press release. I really
What's
did.
laughable about it?
Because it's nonsense. He's trying to make out that if I'm elected on December 13th, I'm going to be like, right, you're all out. You're not working on Friday.
Made that point.
I know you made that point. But Matt Hancock didn't.
At some point under the next Labour government, you want people to be doing a 4-day working week for the same pay as a 5-day working week. You're going to have to hire a fifth more staff, and your wage bill goes up by a fifth.
We are not imposing a 4-day week on the NHS. What John McDonnell has said is that over the next 10 years, let's look at the ways in which we can move to an economy where people are working less hours, because if we can drive up productivity and use the advances in technology, the automation and so on, and the robotics that are coming down the line, maybe we can get to a situation where in the economy people can work less hours. He's going to set up a commission to explore that as a possibility. We're not saying, as I say, and I appreciate you made the point that you were realistic, but I mean Matt Hancock last night in this press release, he's making out like all the doctors and nurses can put their feet up on a Friday. It's just nonsense from him. I mean, honestly, he's got to go to do better than that.
Okay. Can I also ask you about the possibility of some sort of Remain alliance? There are attempts, obviously, Leave alliance, unofficial, from Brexit party standing down candidates for the Tories, calls on the Tories to have some paper candidates who'll stand down in some other seats they think the Brexit party could take. People's Vote people, of course, set up a website suggesting that people could vote tactically to vote for a Remain candidate. It does appear often to benefit the Labour Party, but any chance at all of some sort of official or unofficial alliance with the Liberal Democrats?
No.
Not going to happen?
No.
Okay. Can I also ask you, I don't know if you've seen Boris Johnson's campaign video last night, launched on Twitter.
I've not seen it. What's
You've
he
not
saying?
seen it? Well, he's wandering through corridors with strategically placed a bit of posters of subliminal messaging about 20,000 more police officers. That's what I kept seeing. He also makes himself a cup of tea and answers some...
That's the first time he's ever done that, I bet.
We did wonder about that. He leaves the tea bag in, caused a lot of upset for a lot of people. He was also asked some quick fire questions. Do you mind if I put some of those to you?
Oh, my God. Go on,
What's your
then.
favourite band?
Oasis.
What's the last thing you cooked?
The last thing I cooked? I cooked spaghetti bolognese for my kids at the weekend.
And given a choice, fish and chips or curry?
Curry, an MP for Leicester.
And Marmite, yes or no?
Oh, I hate it, sorry.
Oh, there's a lot of big differences there. I think we can safely say Jonathan Ashworth and Boris Johnson do not see eye to eye on that issue or any other. Why did you decide to stand again?
I've taken the view, having looked at the election campaign, looked at the promises that are being made by the Prime Minister and the Conservative Party, that what we are heading to, if we have a Conservative majority, is essentially a no-deal Brexit, at best a very hard Brexit, which I know some people like, but I believe will be very detrimental to our economy, to our prosperity, will leave us a poorer country. And I want to do my bit to make that argument, to make that case. And although it pains me to say it, I don't believe that the national interest would be to return a Conservative majority at the next general election. And I want to do my bit.
Well, you at your seat in 2017. We won't go into too many specifics, obviously for election reasons, but you had a majority of 20,000. If you split that vote, maybe some loyal constituents will vote for you, but a Tory candidate we know will be standing in that seat. Labour not that far behind a split Tory vote, perhaps combined with the Liberal Democrats, they could come close to actually winning that seat. Are you comfortable with perhaps delivering that seat to the Labour Party, to Jeremy Corbyn-led Labour Party, by splitting that Tory vote?
Look, and for electoral law, we can't get too much into the individual constituency, but basically in my seat, it'll either be the Conservative candidate or me that will win. And I believe that I would be the best candidate because of returning, if you like, to the national issues here. The approach that I would take in terms of Brexit, which I believe will be I would seek to stop a hard Brexit. I think also bring some experience to Parliament when a lot of experienced people are leaving Parliament.
And in terms of what we end up with on December the 13th, now the latest polls, YouGov poll for the Times and Sky is saying today that Tories have now got a 14-point lead because of the Brexit Party standing down candidates in the seats that won in 2017. So again, not in the seat that you were planning to stand in as an independent. We haven't seen so much of a Remain alliance on the other side, although Liberal Democrats doing deals with the Greens and Plaid Cymru, but that's only affecting about 60 of the 650 seats. Would you expect there would be more alliances formed among the Remain supporting parties? For instance, we know in Dominic Grieve's seat, the Liberal Democrats have decided to stand aside. Have you had any conversations with the Liberal Democrats or other Remain supporting parties about them standing aside, giving you a free run?
Well, look, there have been conversations. I don't want to get too much into private conversations, but look, it's not under my control as to what other parties and other candidates decide to do. But I've taken the view that the best way in which I can contribute towards this debate, the best way that I can continue to pursue something that I've pursued for some time now, which is try to stop a no-deal Brexit, is for me to run, for me to try to win my seat, and for me to vote in the next Parliament in a way to prevent that from happening. But I mean, I think that I'd also make this point. Yeah, we're all obviously fascinated about what the election result will be, who's up, who's down, and so on. But I think it's really also important that we discuss what the big issues are here. And in my view, the Conservative Party has got a policy on Brexit, which I think is reckless, is irresponsible, and will have a detrimental effect on a large number of people's jobs and livelihoods.
And yet, the British people voted for it in 2016, and you stood on a manifesto in 2017 as a Tory candidate saying you'd implement that.
Yes, and my view has always been that the best way through this, the best way in which we could bring the country together would be if you like, a soft Brexit. But that
wouldn't bring the country together. There's no evidence that would.
But no, let me make the next comment, Julia. I recognise that. I recognise that what I and others try to do of trying to find a compromise, a Brexit that meant we left the institutions of the European Union but still had access to the European markets in much the way we do at the moment, there isn't the support for that. The country is more polarised. That route, I'm afraid, is no longer there, and it becomes now a very stark choice. Do we leave with a hard Brexit, which I think will have implications that were very, very strongly denied by the Leave campaign in 2016, or do we remain, which is why, reluctantly, I've come to the view that we do now need to have that second referendum, a confirmatory vote on the Boris Johnson deal. Now we know what it is, now we know what the implications are, or remaining within the European Union. I don't know what the result would be, but I think that is a way in which we could resolve this. To the extent we can resolve these things quickly, we can do that relatively quickly.
Well, you don't know
that's
what
the way forward.
You say you don't know what the result would be without. You don't know what the result would be on December the 13th from this election, but you realise, of course, by splitting votes. I know you've been earlier today. You were talking about lots of voters who are looking to have a second referendum to remain. Should be looking at the Liberal Democrats as the biggest clear Remain party. This could lead to, effectively, a Jeremy Corbyn majority government if votes are split between other parties. Would you be happy? I mean, given the choice, just if you had to choose between preventing Brexit or preventing a Jeremy Corbyn government, which is your priority?
Well, I think as a country we should aim higher than being prepared to accept a very hard Brexit or a Jeremy Corbyn government. And I think,
but that may well be what the choice is.
No,
for
I don't accept that, and we shouldn't sort of presume that the British people are boxed into that position. I think there are very, very large numbers of people in this country that would hate the prospect of that very hard Brexit, would hate the prospect of a Jeremy Corbyn government, and they have got the opportunity. We've got a general election. The power is in the hands of the people, and they can vote for candidates who will neither accept Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister nor accept that hard Brexit. Very often that will be the Liberal Democrats. Sometimes it will be independents like me. Sometimes it will be, in truth, some of the more independent-minded Conservatives, but there aren't very many of those left.
So, of course, we're expecting another big speech from Nicola Sturgeon, your party leader, today, and lots of different messages coming out from lots of different political parties today. Health has been the big issue from the Labour Party today, getting Brexit done for the Prime Minister today. Your party is unveiling its green energy deal.
Yes, well, we just need Westminster to get its act together. I mean, we've seen a lot of energy wasted on an essentially internal Conservative discussion about Brexit. And what we need to do is to put an end to this nonsense and get on with the real issues which are facing us, which is a climate emergency. And Scotland's blessed in all the energy resources that we have, all the scientists, the engineers that we have, and we need to unlock the potential that we have to focus on the climate emergency and reindustrialise Scotland on clean, green energy.
OK, and in terms of the focus of which of these energy products and renewable energies you're looking at, which would you be prioritising?
Oh goodness, all of them. This is the great thing about Scotland. We've got wind, we've got wave, we've got tidal, we've got biomass, we've got geothermal during the summer. Less so in November, I have to say. But
that's what I was going to ask you. None of these is a particularly reliable energy source, and a lot of these provide electricity, but don't. Electricity is only about a third of our energy needs in an industrial country. How are you going to produce the rest of it?
Well, in themselves, there is an intermittency, of course, but this is why we need an energy
intermittency. You mean unreliability?
Well, no, obviously photovoltaics don't work when it's dark, but that's why we have wind, we have wave, we have biomass, and what we need is a mix of all of these things. We also need a lot of investment into battery technology, in that you can store up your battery during the day and then you can use it during the night. We are seeing a massive shift, which needs to be even more massive, into electric cars and vehicles. That's going to change how we use energy as well. So we've got a huge potential in Scotland, and we need to focus upon it. I've been on the Energy Committee over in the European Parliament. I'm not anymore, for 5 years, and I love all this stuff. The technology that we have is spectacular. We've got incredible planet-saving research going on in Scottish universities. We have the engineers in spades. One of the problems that we have is that we're great at coming up with ideas, but not necessarily commercialising them domestically. So we need the tools to do that. So we've got a huge thing to win. And it's a shame that so much energy in this election and so much energy at Westminster lately has been wasted on a discussion about Brexit that really hasn't gone anywhere.
Couldn't the same argument be made about the SNP constantly wasting its time and energy on wanting a second referendum and independence? Couldn't you just get on with, I don't know, running schools better, given the latest education results?
Well, we're running schools pretty well, and obviously there's challenges, but we've got a number of things that we are getting on with the day job as the Scottish Government. I've been enjoying getting out and about around the doors around.
But do you take my point though? But the government. This is the government in Westminster's obsession with Brexit. Well, what about the government in Scotland's obsession with independence? Very similar things. The same criticism can be made of both, surely.
Yes, but unfairly.
Why unfairly? Why is Scottish nationalism a good thing and should be talked about and obsessed about, but UK nationalism outside of the EU not a good thing and shouldn't be talked about?
Well, we're not obsessed with it. What we're looking to do is to give the people of Scotland the right to choose our future. Brexit has thrown into really sharp relief a lot of people's views about where the UK is and how the UK works for Scotland, whereas the UK parties, Labour and Conservatives, are hopelessly split on Brexit. We've seen the UK Parliament talk about little else in terms of the last 3 years. We've seen no significant legislation coming forward, where the Scottish Parliament has been passing really quite a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of day job stuff going on. But obviously at this election, we need to focus on the issues that matter to the people of Scotland, which is stopping Brexit, because Scotland's got a clear position on that, Scotland's right to choose, and getting on with the issues that matter to people, like the climate emergency, which isn't going away and is the clearest danger that we threat.